I'd like to take a second to thank Elon Musk for the internet reception up here. We had another MetaZoo Hour on the 24th, and for the first question, we have Big Al Bohr asking, could we see side stories branch from the main show, like hour-long animated movies on certain beasties, that don't exactly tie into the main story, but is a part of the MetaZoo canon? And Mike says, the idea is to open the world to other authors and creators, like Marvel and DC. And I think this is exactly what we're going to see with the shorts. I think those are going to be side stories that may not have to do with the main storyline. And I think it's really interesting here that Mike is open to the idea of opening this up to other creators and then having some form of source of truth for the canon. Big Boy Joe asks, how can I be some type of MetaZoo representative? And Mike says, I think everyone is a MetaZoo rep in their own way. Best way to make it official, though, is through content creation. And I had also replied to that to say, if you're a content creator and you're looking for help getting your setups right, or help with your content editing, etc., please feel free to reach out. I am happy to help. Later in the MetaZoo Hour, Big Boy Joe asks, really want to be an official MetaZoo content creator, already make videos on YouTube, how can I get noticed? And Mike said, make more content. And Mike isn't wrong here. Making more content, getting yourself more well-known in the community is always helpful. So my suggestion would be active in the Discord, so you're getting your name out there, you're getting name recognition, and keep creating content so that your videos get out in the wild, you gain more subscribers, and again, your brand awareness grows. And along that lines, it was actually towards the end of the MetaZoo Hour, I had asked if we could get a content creator Discord role. Andy had tagged the moderators, and we had one within 15 minutes. One of the things that I've noticed now that people have this content creator role is there's a bunch of people in the Discord that I had no idea were content creators. And the problem is, and this goes for Big Boy Joe here, your profiles do not have your links to where you're creating content. So if I wanted to figure out where Big Boy Joe is doing his content, I'd have to message him. I'd have to message many of the people in the Discord. So if you're in the Discord, if you've taken that content creator role, please update your profile so people can click in and understand where you're creating content. I had asked Mike, do you have any interviews coming up? Because I find it very interesting when interviews happen. There's a lot of information that can be taken from those. And Andy was the one that replied to me with, do you want to run one? And honestly, I really would, and I wouldn't care if it was Mike or Andy or someone else from MetaZoo. It would be really interesting to do an interview on this channel. So let me know in the comments below who you'd like to see interviewed on this channel. Along the lines of interviews, Termentic had asked, any chance I can get an interview with you to talk about the storyline and lore? And Andy again was the one that replied and said, please reach out to Bob about any and all interview queries. And I will say that it would be very interesting to have Termentic talk to Mike about the story and the lore, especially before the book is released. We have Jeremy Edmondson ask, will Caster's Cup have exclusive jerseys every year? Mike said yes, and each tower too. So if you remember from this year's Caster's Cup, the jerseys were actually based on past cards that were reprinted. Some of them were holos reprinted in holos, but a number of them were reverse holos reprinted in holos. So this could hint that we're going to be seeing reverse holos make a comeback as holos at next Caster's Cup. And the interesting thing here is that each tower will have its own jersey. Obviously, the towers are aura specific, so I would imagine that the jerseys are also going to be aura specific. I imagine we're going to see Bigfoot, Flatwoods Monster, Slide Rock Bolter, Walking Sam for the Spirit Tower, and many of the other aura mascots for their specific towers. We have Bo Nose asking about the art prints, if they've been signed and numbered, and Andy had replied with yup, and then gave us this image here of these signed art cards. These are laid out on a table, signed and ready to go. Bender Bending Rodriguez asks, when will the plushies and Invasion toys be mailed out to the people who paid in Long Beach? And Andy said, I expect about 2 weeks on both fronts. I wasn't aware of this for Invasion toys, but I did know that the plushies did not all make it to Long Beach Collecticon, so they're actually sending those out after the fact to those who had tickets. Kai Raven asks, can you disclose the print run of the UFO lunchboxes? And Mike says 5,000. This is something we roughly knew from the launch as we watched the numbers sold tick up, and these sold out in just 41 minutes. I'm really excited to see what's in the lunchboxes. We know about the Bitcoin, the pencils, the dice, etc., but not what those look like yet. We have Daring Dashwood asking, will MetaZoo change map pricing? And Mike says, nope. And honestly, I couldn't agree more. I think the map pricing is perfect. And the only thing I really have to say on that is that if you want to support your LGS, pay the map price. The map price is designed to increase the profit margins of the LGS so they can then turn that around and get the next product. It keeps the allocation cycle moving forward for your LGS so you can get the product you want at your local game store. They can provide prize support and run events. Sliders asks, will there be a frog kissing booth at the Frogman Festival? Andy replied with, yes, but the frog is just Mike, myself, and Ted with the upcoming Loveland Frogman masks on. So this is interesting. We do now know about the Trick No Treat promos that are coming out for Halloween. These will be accompanied by masks, and we're getting a look here of the Loveland Frogman mask. We have this wall of text from Outlaw 4188, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the gist of it is that he's pointing out that Pokemon is doing this trick or trade bag of cards for people to give out during Halloween, and thought it would be interesting if MetaZoo did the same. And Andy had replied with, what's a good way of saying we've already done this? And Mike then followed up with, our masks will come with a goodie bag for Halloween trick-or-treaters. And it's actually kind of interesting because as soon as I saw the trick or trade Pokemon bags last week, I did immediately reach out to Andy and be like, hey, I know it's not in the cards for this year, but maybe next year. And he just replied with that signature smiley face. And this is another one of those things that was mentioned weeks and weeks ago in another MetaZoo Hour, that it would be interesting to have chibis wearing costumes. In that MetaZoo Hour, Mike had said, Halloween? ? And then Andy did eventually follow up and say this has been something that has been in the works for about a year now, so they've already had this idea from last year's Halloween events. Rackmaster 00 asks, hey Mike, any plans to go to the Mothman Festival? And Mike says, yup. I don't know why, I feel like the one-word answers are much more interesting if I put inflection on them. Yup. The Mothman Festival is being held in mid-September in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and they actually teased a promo card that's going to be there for that as well. It depicts Mothman flying over the Cumberland Dragons and Point Pleasant Mothman baseball game from the comics. Sam Squanch asks, what are your plans to honor and respect First Nations culture, lore, and artists with the native set? And Mike said they're hiring advisors, which I think is an amazing idea. You're going to be doing a set that is based in native lore. You want to make sure that you're doing justice to the lore that it's representing. So by hiring advisors, they're essentially ensuring that they're double-checking what they're thinking and that somebody then approves it to say, yeah, this makes sense for what the lore is, what the Native American culture is representing. Mike has always been very open about how he feels about creating a safe and open space. Frenchie Icon asked next 5 sets, and if you've been watching this channel, you probably already know them, but I thought it'd be interesting to go over them again. The next 5 are Seance, Native, War, 7 Seas, and Yokai Island base set. And one thought I had on this is, as we look to those next 5 sets, what are the aura types that they're based on going to be? We already know that Seance is Spirit, Native is Earth, that's been confirmed. War, I thought maybe Light or Fire, depending on where they're going to go with that. With Light, I was thinking more of Angels versus Demons, or Angels versus Old Scratch. 7 Seas is obviously going to be water. It's going to have a pirate theme to it. And if I remember correctly, Yokai Island is going to be the first set to introduce a new aura type, and I believe that's going to be Wind. So I'd imagine that Yokai Island is going to be a Wind-based set. 680 Whiskey asks, Mike, will MetaZoo be at New York Comic-Con all 4 days beginning with Thursday, October 6th? Mike replied with, should be there full time, so they're going to be there all 4 days, and they also did mention that they're going to spread things out as much as possible across those 4 days. With Mike being from New York, I imagine this is one that's pretty easy for him to go to on a regular basis. Melvilla asks, are we going to see original MetaZoo cryptids in sets? And Mike says, maybe. And this is really interesting because many of the beasties and cards that we have now are based off existing lore in the world. It makes sense that MetaZoo would want to create their own unique beasties, and it's not completely unheard of already if you think of the casters and some of the things that they've done around those. So my question is, can you consider Sam, Adam, Rose, M, etc. Cryptids Fluff asks, will Cryptid Nation still be viable and or supported after Yokai Island? In other words, do you want to avoid the MTG problem of old sets becoming unplayable? And this question has to do with power creep over time. You have new mechanics that get introduced that then kind of render the older cards useless because they can't handle them. And Mike says, no set rotation, no bans. The no bans is interesting because you do have incredibly powerful cards already from the Cryptid Nation set. You see Gassy being used a lot now to bring back spells from your cemetery. That's incredibly powerful. And eventually people are going to find ways to use cards in a way that weren't intended, and then have a amazing effect that basically wins them every game. Playtesting is great, but it doesn't catch everything. So my thoughts on this is that I think set rotation is just going to happen naturally as part of the meta, not something that MetaZoo does, but as things evolve, cards will be less used because they can't keep up with newer mechanics. And on the bans, in a sense, I like saying, okay, we're not going to ban anything because that means we have cards now that we're always going to be able to use. But at the same time, it's probably not an absolute. Obviously, I don't speak for MetaZoo, but I can see us getting into a situation eventually where a ban might need to happen. Call Me Cinema asks PSA promos when? Mike says soon. Andy follows up with, do I show them? And he shows this sneak peek here, which I don't believe is a promo. It actually looks like a stamp that would go into the passports that they've been using. So I'd imagine that at one of the upcoming conventions, maybe New York Comic Con, they're going to be working with PSA, and PSA is going to be one of the stamps that you need to collect in your passport. Rockman Dude asks, will Prism Aura ever be reprinted? Prism Aura is quite an expensive and useful card, so people do want to see it reprinted in things like release event boxes. And Mike says the reserve list will be updated before Seance, and this is something that I had touched on months ago. Mike had actually left a comment in the Caster Society Discord, and what he was hinting at way back then was Prism Aura being part of the future reserve list. And I'm going to say that with the special nature of the special auras, the Prism Aura, the Neutrality Totality Aura, the Possessed Aura, that they're likely always going to be put on the reserve list after the set's release. We have Since Spacey ask for more full holo auras, please, and Andy replies with Seance, and that's something I can confirm. After the last MetaZoo Hour on the 16th, I believe it was, Mike and Andy had a little back and forth that talked about full holo auras. And in that back and forth, they had said that the full holo auras are going to make a return to Seance spellbooks. So I imagine they're going to be right in the middle of the aura bricks in the spellbook, just like they were with CN2. Blah! Asks, Mike, how many secrets are left to be found in Cryptid Nation and Nightfall? Mike says, a few. And this is something that I find very interesting because I think that there's an Indrid Cold card in Cryptid Nation. And this has to do with the Fated Spade Kickstarter cards. The Joker for Wilderness is Green Man, which we know is the secret rare. The Joker for Nightfall is Old Scratch, which is the secret rare. But the Joker for Cryptid Nation is Indrid Cold. Indrid Cold himself didn't make an appearance until Nightfall in the core sets. So personally, I think that we have something incredibly rare hiding in either CN2 or CN1, maybe even a one of one. Nojo asks, how is the MetaZoo short film going? And Mike says that he's submitting 15 scripts this week. And that's amazing to hear. The shorts are going to get started before the show actually starts. I can't wait to see what these entail. I can't wait to see if there's actually going to be much voice acting, or if it's going to be more along the silent type where we're going to be watching things interact with each other, maybe cryptids doing cryptid things, or if this is going to be more along the lines of explaining some of the lore parts ahead of the IP so that they don't have to dive as deep in the core show. Captain Asia asks, are you guys planning on doing streamer kits for Twitch and eBay streamers? And this is something that we knew from last MetaZoo Hour. Mike says, yep. But to follow on from that, there was a question from Boogerball's Streamy Weenie asking, does this mean Whatnot streamers definitely won't get kits? Mike says, not through Whatnot. So there will be an opportunity for people to get the kits, and they could technically use them on Whatnot if they wanted to, but just the fact that they're Whatnot streamers would not get them the kit. Peeweezo asking the tough question of, will YouTube content creators / streamers also be eligible for LGS kits? And Mike says streamer kits. So this is the first hint that YouTube content creators will also be eligible for the streamer kits. I'm very curious to see what the eligibility rules are here, because if I am eligible, the giveaways in the weekly trivia segment of the weekly news is going to get much more interesting. It also means I'll need to find some harder questions. Percolex asks, any plans to make the tarot cards gradable? And Mike says yes, and this is interesting because of the shape of the tarot cards. They don't match a traditional TCG card shape, they're elongated, so you wouldn't have a traditional slab when you get these graded. Mavi asks, will there be a wider release of the tarot cards? Mike says yes, eBay exclusive with holos. So the new interesting information here is that there's going to be holo forms of the tarot cards. We already did know that these are going to be the Seance eBay product that they're going to be releasing. And another thing that we know is that the cards that were given out at Long Beach are black bordered, like sample cards. The true tarot cards will be red bordered, and this is something that Andy had confirmed last week and was confirmed again in the chat this week after the MetaZoo Hour. Moldy Potions asks, any utility to the tarot cards in-game similar to the playing cards? And Mike just replied with the smiley face, which means that yes, they're going to have some form of utility while playing the game, but isn't ready to share yet. This likely means that the tarot cards have a very specific utility to seance cards. Since the Faded Spade playing cards are token related, I would imagine that these are not going to be also token related. So my guess is that they're going to somehow affect the battlefield. With tarot cards being used as a way to predict the future, maybe they have effects that will do something in a couple turns. Peyote asks, when full tarot card decks, and Andy replied with Comic-Con in New York City. This also confirms that eBay will be at the New York City Comic-Con, and I believe this is going to be the first event where they go live on eBay Live, so we have a lot of interesting things happening at New York Comic-Con. If you remember from a few weeks ago, if you remember from the MetaZoo Hour from a few weeks back, there was also hints that the plushies will make their first appearance at the Comic-Con as well. Mitrata asks, any update on the online TCG client? And Mike says, we have an official partner. Woot! So this is really important because the last update we got on this was that they had a number of suitors, but they wanted to make sure that they were picking the right one for the longevity of the game they want to create. And my guess is that maybe they've had this picked out for a few weeks now, because at the last MetaZoo Hour, the question of code cards came up, and it was confirmed that they're expecting Native to be the first set with code cards now. We have another question from Boogerball's Streamy Weenie. Any sneak peek of the alt language UFO card? And Mike says, all over UFO cards. I haven't had a chance to dig through my UFO cards yet, but I know that Termentic is starting to find some interesting symbols in some of the cards, and probably working on a theory for that. Nate Kenny asks, will there be Christmas ugly sweaters this year? Would love family sets and Halloween costumes. Good ideas here. Very modest. And Mike replied with, yes, MetaZoo has you all covered for the holidays. I'm going to be honest, I've never been a fan of ugly sweaters, but I've also really never had something I liked as much as MetaZoo, so we'll see. That was all the interesting questions that Mike and Andy had answered for the MetaZoo Hour that I wanted to pull out and talk about. There are 3 questions that I pulled out that I can answer that did not get answered by Mike or Andy. And the first one is from Mildly Caucasian. When are the second anniversary shipping, and UFO binders when? The second anniversary cards are shipping at the end of August, and the UFO binders were released on the 26th of August, which is likely earlier in the day than I can get this video out. Control Art asks, are you guys bringing back box toppers for future sets? And the answer is yes, but probably not as soon as you'd like. What they have confirmed in the past is that they're planning to do box toppers only with the core sets of each block. So that would be the Cryptid Nation base set, Yokai base set, Grimm's Kingdom base set, so on and so forth. We have seen box toppers make an appearance in other products such as eBay Wilderness, and there have been hints at other box toppers appearing for side products in the future, but I honestly don't remember if I can talk about that. And another one from Mildly Caucasian is SCP coming before Seance, and no, it's not coming before Seance, but it will be here in December. During the MetaZoo Hour, we actually got 2 teases from Andy as well. The first here was the LGS mat for the second anniversary playmats. These are most likely going to be included in the LGS kits for UFO. And the second tease was, all right, force my hand, one reaction, and I show you a new Squonk art. And we have this green, sad, updated Squonk that's most likely going to be in Seance. Well, there you have it. There is another MetaZoo Hour that has been covered. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.